Alright, hello there again, and today we're going to be making some knives, some wood carving knives, and I just kind of go over the process that I use now. There's a bunch of different ways that you can shape the steel, or you can heat it and do the heat treatment, and do the sharpening and do the handling. Um, I do have a whole handling process in this video, but I have another handling video where I do most of the work by hand, and it's a different handling method, a little bit nicer. So basically, there's a lot of videos that have a lot of bad information, and it took me a while to get down how to make these knives. It's really not hard. You don't really need that much equipment. You see here, which we'll go over later in the film. This is my kiln, and to do the heat treating, and it's really not necessary. I did some of the first ones with just a propane torch, and I think on some kitchen stoves, depending on the stove and how much you know out output there is on the gas, you can even do it with that. So again, that is specifically because we're doing small pieces of steel. There's small blades. It's not very thick, so it's much easier to get it up to that critical temperature. Okay, so let's go into the process here. Okay, so here's the steel. That's how I order it in that size. So it's the same width that my blades are going to be. And then go ahead and cut it at a angle diagonally so that it's since most of the blades are going to have a shape on there on the end close to that, it'll be easier to shape it. So yeah, this is a Starrett steel. It's from get it off Amazon, and the packaging will have all the information you need on it, the heat treatment process and temperatures and times, and we'll look into that a little bit later. So basically, just cut this into kind of diagonals, and then if you want the tang to be a little bit thinner, for whatever reason, you can do some shaping like this, and it's better to have this stuff real clamped up, and you have it clamped close to where you're cutting because it'll make it vibrate like you saw in one of the other ones there. These long cuts you don't want to do too much of too long because it will heat up the disc too much. So you see this just kind of bends straight off of there, and that will get you basically the shape that you're looking for. Again, if you're doing a really thin one and the piece is already thin, then you don't need to do this. But if you have to do extra shaping, it's just cut into it and do it. And there you go. So now time to do the bevel. So I would really suggest getting your steel from a reputable dealer that tells you all the specs on it, and don't mess around with random stuff offline or trying to make it out of an old saw blade or something, unless you want to practice shaping. But I just use an angle grinder. I have a belt sander and stuff, but this stuff's so soft. It's just the easiest way for me to get out the basic shape. And you can absolutely do this with a file. It's they give you the steel very annealed, and it's very soft. And it may be a good idea to just go ahead and use a file for your first ones. It'll be much more accurate. So I'm spitting on it there. You can see it's smoking because they get very hot from this. And actually, if you any of the angle grinder stuff, the power tools, at that speed, one of the reasons why I don't get it thicker is because when you try to cut it for too long, it'll start to burn off part of the disc. And it's fine if we go over temperature on this now because we're going to heat treat it anyway, so it's fine if it gets dark or gets discolored or gets too hot. After you heat treat metal or you buy a tool, you don't want it to go over a certain temperature, and you'll find out later in this process why. It's because it really messes up how the steel performs. So I finally just got some water to start putting on these so I could handle them. And yeah, this is a very funny blade, but turns out to be interesting. So this is really what you do for all of them, whatever kind of shape or style it's going to be. You just kind of do your shaping over here, and this one's just going to be kind of a straight blade, and you just kind of put your bevel on each side. This one was a little bit rough, and just round over the top there. You can see how quick that happens. That's just why I like the angle grinder. It's just fast. You want to try to get a close kind of bevel on each side. It's similar bevel on each side. I've never had a huge problem with it being, out of balance. If it's a little bit one way or the other, it's not a huge deal. It'll get kind of fixed with your sharpening anyway. So some people think that it's a good idea to not sharpen these completely before heat treatment because the very thin edges act like a radiator, and they get too hot or something. And I don't really worry about it because it usually is going to come off anyway when I'm cleaning it. But if you want to, you can leave just a tiny bit of flat spot, not complete the bevel, complete the edge. So I'm just doing very even strokes with the angle grinder because it all happens very fast. For me, I don't have a steady hand, so it's better for me to just do very fast, quick strokes with the angle grinder. And that's about it there. So that was really it. That was making the blade, and not very difficult. One thing that I forgot at that process, that step, was that you want to roughen up the tang, with the part that's going to go on the handle. You can roughen it up later with sandpaper, but it's easier to do it now, and maybe make some dents in it so that the epoxy really has something to hold on to. So you can see here I'm already sticking stuff in there. What I'm doing right now is I'm warming up my oil. So again, I did plenty of knives without my forge. This is like just a brick. You can go on some knife making forums and find out. It's a very specific brick. I remember at some point I tried to make one with like some other ceramic brick, and it was a mess. It didn't work out. You need this kind, and don't remember what it is or where I got it from. You can also make the other forges where you buy the fiberglass, ceramic, wool stuff. I don't know what it is. This has been really good. I mean, everybody said that these were going to break, and the little ones were, didn't last long, or they weren't that great, but this has been more than I've needed, and I've had it for quite a few years. So, some people wrap wire around them. I just got like 2 long machine screws with 2 mending plates that are on the top and the bottom, and that also gives it some legs to a little stand. And I have 2. For a long time I only had 1, but now I started doing bigger tools, so I have 2 holes for the propane to go into. These are very cheap propane, just $3 kind of things, and no special attachments on them. And then yeah, so you kind of point those in the right direction. It's a very cold night, and so the wind and the temperature outside really affect your kiln, your forge, and so I have set up like some very big pieces of plywood all around it, and they still don't really do it all. It takes a while for this to heat up, although once it gets going with these bricks, then it's going. So you're also going to have your, you have to quench. This is 01 tool steel. It needs to be quenched in oil very specifically because water can't bring the temperature down fast enough. And you can see there, that's what I just did is I touched the blade to the magnet. I have a little magnet, that circle there, and you can see it's stuck, and I had to shake it off, which means it's not at critical temperature yet. So I think the critical temperature is somewhere around 1500 degrees. It's on the packaging of whatever steel you buy. It should be on this steel if it's good stuff. Anyway, the oil that I'm using is it's leftover motor oil, and it's like this one's from my scooter. It's like old stuff when I changed oil, and you can get it I think from mechanics places, or you can just go buy some. It's not super expensive. Go buy a bottle. On a lot of my first knives, they were just doing like 1 or 2 small ones, so I would use like a shot glass. And because you only need it to be deep enough for the blade, it doesn't have to be wide, so you don't need a gallon of oil to dip it in. I think at some point I was using glass, and it got too hot after a few knives. Once I started doing more, and it broke the glass, so I went over to an oil can. And you'll see in videos when guys are forging knives that there'll be fire. That generally won't happen, but there will be a lot of smoke. I'm saying it won't happen with these smaller knives, with only a few of them. if you get up to larger tools, I mean, it's happened to me when I've done larger knives. There can be fire and stuff. The oil will ignite, and but even without that, it's gonna smell bad. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's gonna be smoke. It's gonna be like, instant car burning oil smell. So you don't really want to do this inside. And you want to be safe about this whole process. I have my hose going next to me, and I have a bucket of water ready because the hose isn't quite fast enough. And I've soaked down my whole yard beforehand with the hose, so everything's wet. Because when you drop these things, once they come out of the forge, it's like a cigarette lighter, and whatever they touch is gonna go into flames. You might want to wear gloves. I ended up not wearing gloves now because it's too delicate of a procedure, and I actually caused more problems and was more dangerous, burned myself more with the gloves on. So I don't really know what to tell you about that. Just be safe. So I warmed up the oil a little bit. Some people say it's good to do that. You warm up the oil a little bit so that it can actually cool quench the steel faster, and basically it has to meet that temperature instead of react to it so hard. So you can see there, I just got that one to hit the magnet and not have any, it didn't stick at all, which means we've gotten to that critical temperature. So right when you get it so it's not sticking, you stick it back in there, and then you pop it straight into the quench and wiggle it around until you think it's cooled off. Hopefully your quench is deep enough that the oil, so that there's, you need to quench the whole blade. So you can have like the tip of the tang, like half of the tang can be unheat treated. That's fine. It'll be inside the handle as long as everything outside of the handle is heat treated. So you can see there, just kind of going there and spin around. You see the smoke coming out. It smells awful. And the colors here that you guys are seeing of the steel and inside the kiln are not really what you're going to see in reality. I wouldn't go off of the colors. A lot of people will say that when in their heat treating stuff. They're like, oh, you want to get it to this color. Don't worry about the colors. Worry about the magnetization. And I think somebody said that it was like, I've heard some people say that it'll ruin the steel if it goes over the critical temperature. And you're not going to, unless you have some ridiculous forge setup, you're not going to get over that temperature. And no, it doesn't ruin it. I mean, you just maybe might have to do it over again. A lot of tools, especially back in the old days, were drop forged, and you have to get the steel a lot hotter than that. And then they would go back and heat treat it. But anyway, so what we're doing here is, if when you get the steel, it's very soft. All right, which means it's called anneal. It's annealed steel, and so there's a hardness kind of scale. The RC hardness is the scale is what most people will go by, and most carving tools are going to be, I think, like in between 55 and 62, something like that. And that's what the O1 will get into. Don't quote me on that. I think that's around what it is. And so when you get it, it's like, maybe around 40 or 50 or something like that. And then when you heat treat it, it's like way up there. It's like 70 or 80, and it's so brittle at this point after we heat treat it that it can shatter if you drop it on the ground or if you handle it too hard. And I'll show you later. I'll test it to make sure that it's been heat treated properly. A file won't be able to bite into it. It'll just kind of skate off the surface. It can bite into it, but the difference, I'll show you the difference, and you'll see the difference in the annealed steel and the steel after it's been in between the heat process, whatever. Okay. So you can see also what I'm doing here is I put my maker's mark on these blades, and that's what I do right there. This process here, and this is a little sketchy. It's taking me some time to get this down, but it works for me. And you can see there my my little anvil is like a little thing from the street. They like dug up one of the streets around here, so they're like replaced all of these pieces, and so it's just like a heavy piece of steel. It actually has marks on it, and like it's not smooth, so it leaves marks. But I also use it has an indentation on one side, and that's what I use to make the spoon knives. Let's go to that now. Alright, so I'm going to dig out my next piece. Oh, I'm sticking more in there. Okay. So I use these needle nose pliers. I actually use vice grips. Tried to use them. Seems like a good idea, right? You have a good grip on it, and then you could do all your punching and shaping. The problem is the vice grips. Oh, I just dropped that. Whoops. Yeah, that happened. I don't think I'm going to show it here, but actually I dropped something else and it, there started a fire. It's pretty sketchy. Anyway, the vice grips will, they get hot from touching the steel or being close to the forge, whatever, like, and it expands the steel so you can't get a grip on them. It's kind of interesting. So you have to deal with it, like, with the, and just be careful, have a steady hand with the grips. So here I'm doing a spoon knife, and it happens very easily. There's a few different ways you can do this. You can have a few pipes set up, or you just wrap it around something. You just have something around to hammer it into. It works out surprisingly well. I've tried doing other forging stuff, and I'm just awful at it. It's so hard to get the steel to do what you want it to do. But for some reason I can make spoon knives, so I imagine most of you guys can. And by the way, when you shape the spoon knives, you want to do a chisel bevel, which means it's only on one side, and that bevel is going to be on the bottom side. So you want to think about it before you make it. Like if you're right-handed, you want to pull it towards you and have the bevel on the bottom side facing towards you, and then you're going to have the rounding part going up into that. I've definitely made the wrong side before, but I mean, you can use both of them. So I'm sorry there's not more that you can see about the shaping of the spoon knives. I really just don't know much about it. I mean, after you get it hot, it just kind of bends. In fact, all the blades, if you do anything to them, they can bend a little bit. So if you have something flat like an anvil, or like what I'm using, have your hammer, then you might need to flatten it a tiny bit. But if you're not doing anything funky, I wouldn't mess around with maker's marks until you feel comfortable with them. Because if they do get bent out of shape, it's very hard to get them back to flat. It's almost impossible. And so yeah, just shape it, heat it, and then do the treatment there. So this is the spoon knife now. I don't know if you guys could even see how quickly and fast it happened when it got shaped. It was just kind of tapping it over that hole, and that made that happen. And that's it there. So yeah, you want to use generally a thicker steel for a spoon knife than a regular carving knife. But like on these, they're a little bit thinner. They're still good for like doing finishing, just kind of the basic shaping. They're just not going to dig out a huge trench for you. So let's go take these inside and clean them up. Okay, so after those get quenched, the blades, it's gonna cook the oil on there, and it's gonna leave this sediment everywhere. They're gonna be all black and crusty, and so you just sit around and sand that off a little bit. You don't have to sand all of it off, but you need to sand part of it off at least so that you can see the color that it turns. Gives you some more indication that you're doing the heat treatment process correctly. And you're generally going to have to do this next step indoors because you're going to do it in an oven or in a toaster oven. An oven is generally going to be better because the heat's more consistent. But it's going to be cooking that that burnt oil inside your house, and so if you have loved ones in the house and you want them to keep loving you, you need to take off as much of that black stuff as you can. It's just gonna be like warm, baked over inside of an old car smell in your house. So you just sit around and sand it off, and some of the tool makers leave this stuff on. Like Henry Taylor and FlexCut leaves some sort of black stuff on. I don't think it's from the heat treatment, but it's kind of the same deal. But yeah, you don't need to leave any of it on. You don't want it on the tang because you want the epoxy to grip onto it. So you just sit around getting black crap everywhere. You could maybe use a wire brush. I don't know. I just use a rough sandpaper. You just start working at it all. You can see how this one was a fresh one, and it really takes a while. It fills up the sandpaper. Just deal with it, get it all off. Okay, so I'll show you the file test, and basically this is after we're done the quench. Got it up to critical, and you can see the file's not really biting on. Now watch when I get onto this one. As soon as I get it on there, it's stuck, alright, and it skips because the file's biting in. And you could actually, you can get it to bite in on the other ones. It's just very hard. It will file on it, but comparatively it skates across it. It doesn't do anything. It's just another indication that everything's going well. So here's the package and the instructions that come with the steel. It tells you what's in it. Over on the bottom there it says hardening 1450 to 1500, and then needs an oil quench. Over on the right it's got the tempering. This is the okay, there I'm pointing to that, and then the tempering. You can see the RC hardness there. You can see it's for an hour, and then the temperatures. Okay, so we want to go about 60 is what I generally like, which is kind of in the middle of what most wood carving tools are. My microwave oven or toaster oven gets way too hot when it's preheating, so I do preheat it, let it even out, and then I put my stuff in there inside of foil, make sure that the temperature stays consistent. And that's why I suggest using an oven. You can always look at the stuff, keep looking at it, make sure that the color doesn't go off. Again, the camera is going to mess with the colors, and so is your monitors, so hopefully you guys maybe see a bit of a golden straw color there. That's what we're looking for. And even once you see that color, you need to keep going. You need to do the full hour. Make sure that the inside of the metal has been heat treated, not just the outside, alright? And at that point, after that's done and cooled down, really just going to start cleaning it up, and it's going to be ready to go. You can see the little gold there still, kind of straw color. I don't know, people describe it as different. It's a color, so whatever. You just need to follow the temperatures and you'll be good. Alright, so we need to make some handles, and I have one clamped up here. I have a few ready, and these are all like pen blanks. They're larger pen blanks, which will be enough wood for me, so I don't have to cut them down or anything. Or one of them actually, okay, some of them aren't all pen blanks, but they're down to size from one process or another. And basically you kind of hold the drill up to the size of this thing, and again I'd suggest watching my other handling video where I do a nicer process, because these are forged from bar stock. If you drill a hole that size, there's going to be space around it, and it's not the prettiest. So you can do another piece of wood that you laminate onto the top of this that only has the specific shape of the tang, so that it's flush and there's no extra room there. But I don't do that on these. This is kind of my older process, what I used to do for a long time, and it totally works. There's some tools that are on the market that are made like this. It's totally functional, and most people aren't going to notice a difference. And if you want, sometimes the tang's too fat for you to have the proper shape of the handle. For there to be enough wood on the outside for it to be stable. So what you can do is drill 2 holes like you see me doing here, and so instead of just drilling one huge hole, you basically make a little rectangle kind of, or an oval, by drilling multiple holes with a smaller drill and then connecting them very carefully with your drill. And try not to break off the drill bits in there. It happens to me all the time, and I do it in this one. But it's also because I use cheap drill bits. So, yeah, sometimes if they get stuck in there, you're kind of done for. And as far as using exotic woods, I mean, they're hard to work with, and you can't carve them by hand. So I'd see. All right, so we're gonna make some handle shapes, and I'm gonna rough out the shape with this weird angle grinder attachment that I have. It's basically a power rasp, and it went a little bit too fast. It's a little bit unreliable, but it worked for roughing out stuff. And this is like a cheap version of very expensive tools, but this came from Harbor Freight, I believe. It wasn't that expensive. And, but most of my handles, if I don't shape them by hand, which again you can see in the other video, I just go straight with the sanding discs that are on the angle grinder, and you see something rough in the beginning, and then work your way up the grits if you want to. But it shouldn't take too long. I mean, especially if you have your wood down to shape like this one. Alright, so now I've moved on to sanding it down and down the handles after getting some rough shaping out. Again, this is my power tool process. Go check out the other video if you want to see how I do it by hand. They're both the same, and I'm sure you guys figure out your own ways or tools to use. You're just shaping the thing, and as far as shape goes, go off the knives that you have and keep feeling it. Keep feeling the handle, see how it feels in your hand. Generally, I tend to make them too large and have to bring them down. But I think I make them too large because most of the ones that come commercially are too small. So you can always take wood off, right? Anyway, so this is what I do. I kind of turn it upside down. This one sits upside down well because it has the battery pack, which is square, and it fits in this block good. But you guys may want to attach, stabilize it somehow. It has these plate screws on each side where the handles go, and you can make a little frame or jig for it. If you are going to use an angle grinder, you can get an angle grinder for cheap, from Harbor Freight or wherever. So the sanding discs aren't too bad either. You have to get the attachment, the original thing that screws the sanding disc onto the angle grinder, but I mean, as you guys can see, I do pretty much the whole knife making process. This is all I use is the angle grinder, and that's not even necessary. I could, use this stuff. So now we're done with that. Now it's time to glue the epoxy, the blades into the handles. So how far you take the sanding process is up to you. I've done a lot of knives that I wasn't going to show anybody, so it didn't really matter. I left them rough. Not even contoured or anything, just kind of rough shaped them. That was good enough. So here we're doing the epoxy. You can see I've masking taped over all the handles. Just makes it a little bit easier, and a little easier for cleanup. You have to sand off the stuff. The epoxy, if it's too thick, you can't sand it off. It takes too long. I mean, you can, but it takes way too long. And you have to pry it off with a knife, and you end up, usually taking a chip out of the wood. So it's better not to get the epoxy on the rest of the handle. Just try to get it in that hole. It is a little tricky, I gotta say. So you can clean epoxy when everything's still wet with rubbing alcohol. But you want to be sparing with it. You don't want to mix that rubbing alcohol into the epoxy. So this is a 2-part epoxy. You can use most of them, the 5-minute or the 30-minute or whatever it's called, 2-ton. They both seem to work well. Then you can mix up, after you mix this stuff up, you can put in some sawdust from whatever color from the wood that you're going to put it into. And then that will make it mix in a little bit more. People won't notice it's epoxied. Nobody's going to see this anyway. It's just going to be you looking at it. But so when you're shaping it, or when you're sawing some of it up, keep some of the sawdust. Just have a spare piece. A saw makes the best sawdust. Is really what I'm trying to get at. You don't want extra stuff in there. So I have some saved up in here, And I'm not even using, this is like just sawdust from all of the pieces, so just makes it a little bit darker so the light doesn't get in there. Makes it a little better. I think there's some cat hair in there too, which is supposed to really help the epoxy. So you just mix that up, and I use, chopsticks, whatever that you're gonna throw away afterwards, but to get it into these holes, depending on how messy your hole drilling was, this process is gonna be a little bit hard or easy. And basically this stuff is so thick that it's gonna get the first bit. Every time you put the epoxy in there, it's gonna seal off the air. Okay, and it's not gonna sink in there. The air is gonna hold it, and it's gonna have a skin on top. So you have to try to drip it in there, and then you have to stick stuff in there to get it, go down in there. It's a mess. It really is. So you want to try to keep your hole not from being too messy. I'm barely speaking English at this point, guys. Anyway, you can kind of see what I'm doing here. And what can happen is this stuff settles. You're just going to leave it upright. And sometimes if the hole is very large, you need to tape the blade into place so it doesn't, sag over to the side and it's off center. And but anyway, so it has air bubbles and stuff in it, so it'll settle sometimes, and you'll come back and there'll be space in there, and you can probably leave it, but if you want it to be flush, you just do another application of epoxy. The blade will be in there, of course, but you shouldn't have as much room to fill up, so it won't be as hard. And when you feel like you got enough epoxy in there, you stick the handle in there, see how that looks, and if you've put too much epoxy, it might overflow at this point. Hopefully not. Keep some paper towels ready, and certainly you can mask off the entire handle if you want to, if you feel more safe doing that. It shouldn't take too much, and you can always add more later, so just try to feel it out. That's basically that. So again, the other process of the handling, when you have a bar stock like these where the tang is flat, basically we would have put another piece of wood over the top, and it'd be a thin piece of wood, so you can drill a small hole, and then you can get a saw in there or a file, and you can shape that hole into an exact rectangle, the shape of the tang, so that it'll be completely flush. And it also gives a different wood on the end, seal it off. Watch the other video, you see that. And if you guys, a great place to start when you are starting to make knives is just to handle your own knife. And you can, either take a knife out of a handle that you bought, or you can, like from Deep Woods Ventures, the guy that I push, he's my kind of favorite knife maker. He's a guy I looked up to when I was carving, when I started making knives, and still, I ask him questions and stuff sometimes. But he forges his knives out of rod stock, and that's a lot easier to put into a handle. It's much harder to make. I've tried to forge knives from rod stock, and it's never turned out well. So, in general, I would suggest getting a real quality carving knife, so you know what you're looking for. It's not too hard to make a good quality carving knife on your own, but you need to know what you're looking for. And if you've carved for a little bit, you'll know what it really takes in a knife to be up to par. So then you'll take off your masking tape, and it'll be a little bit difficult to take off because, well, it depends, I guess, on how messy you were. But if there's epoxy on it, then like mine, or I have the masking tape so that it goes over the edge a little bit, so that I could fill up the top with epoxy, and so when it settled down, it would come from, like, it'd make a little well at the top there, and it would go down in there. So anyway, so all that epoxy is gripping on at the top. So most of this rips off except for this top part, and then I'll just take another knife and very gently, carefully, only push the epoxy. The epoxy will not grip onto something that's been sanded or polished, so it'll come off pretty easily. and hold on to itself, and that's another reason why I told you guys to put some dents and roughen up the tangs um, before you epoxy them into the handles. And even on the blades, like you can just run a blade down it. If you have epoxy, you got epoxy on the blade. After it dries, you can just run another blade on it, and it'll come right up. So then we'll just take some sandpaper and clean it up. There's a little bit of crap left over from the masking tape, and there's a little bit of epoxy that needs to be just kind of smoothed down, and if there's any other spots here and there. If you're doing the really fine polish, I'm gonna be putting oil on these, so not like it's super shiny or anything, but I want the surface to be nice and smooth. Alright, so here we're using some of the Minwax. I think it's called Antique Oil Finish. I don't know. Minwax uses like these crazy names, and they have nothing to do with the product. But and here's the issue here too. This is basically like a tongue oil finish, but it's a little bit harder. And tongue oil finish, it's not really tongue oil. Sometimes it has a little tiny bit in there, but it's actually not. Anyway, the point is, this is a finish that will seal the wood, and it hardens the wood a tiny bit. And just the finish itself is hardened. So, like, if you put a bunch of shellac polyurethane in it, you dropped it or something, it would probably make scratches and stuff. So this stuff is kind of gives you a bit of the finish without having a really thick layer that's super shiny, and then it can get damaged easily. So I was talking to Paul about what he uses. I think he uses something called True Oil. Basically, these oils are stuff that you put on like gun stocks, stuff like that. So basically, we're ready now to sharpen these bad boys up and test them out. I'm using here the DMT stones. If you still have at this point like any kind of black stuff, or it looks like there's still marks on the blade from the grinders or whatever, the really rough grits, or if you did a file, if there's still lines on there, go ahead and just go with a rough sandpaper. Start wherever you need to. You need to, get these up to a mirror polish on at least the cutting edge. The ones I make, usually I leave them kind of rough, because over time they're gonna get polished down from use, and I just get a little bit lazy about it. But I really only deal with the part that's gonna be cutting, which is the main bevel part. So they still have like little grooves and stuff, and you can see the history of its making in there, and I kind of like that. But it is nice to have a super clean blade that's all polished up, especially when it's new. So I think this is like a 600 grit. This is the red, the fine DMT stone, and then I'll go to extra fine, and then I'll strop it. And you can clean these with just like a paper towel with some water on them. I actually used to just use, I would spit on a paper towel, and I still do that actually when I'm traveling and I don't have water around. That's kind of why I love the DMT stones, you don't have to use oil or have water soaking in there or anything. These big ones I'm trying to take care of, so I'm trying to just use water on them. I'm trying not to spit on them too much. But yeah, they're pretty. These are new too, so they're still pretty aggressive. They have a break-in period, and I don't know. They work more consistently after they break in. It's pretty quick, the break-in period, but they're just a little bit super aggressive in the beginning. And for me right here, that works out for me. So. And let's skip over to the spoon knife. So sharpening the spoon knife, and again, use a sandpaper to get this close. If your curve wasn't exactly perfect, like mine wasn't completely perfect, then shape it down to. I guess you have a little bit of room for error, and you can. Actually, I think that these I did it on the angle grinder when I was cleaning everything. When I was doing the handles, I just went back to that and did a nice steady sweep, and because I think on the tip of it or something, it was they were a little bit off. But when you make a bevel and then you shape steel, you can't expect that edge to be perfect. So you may have to go back and do some work to try to get it even. So this is kind of how I do this. It's always going to be awkward to do something like a spoon knife by hand. You just kind of have to get used to it. Just set your wrist and keep rotating it. You see me doing like little pieces there. You can do it in sweeps if you feel more steady with that. If you do it in little ones, you just want to keep going back and forth to kind of blend in the areas as you're working on them. And I'm going a bit fast here because I've been doing it for a while, so I have a bit of confidence in that, and it's not as easy as it looks, I gotta say. But once you get a bevel going, it'll kind of rest on it. So just that. So you want, on the spoon knives, you want most of your bevel to be on the outside and not on the inside of that curve. But though, if you're making your own, it may have to happen anyway that you have to bevel, work on the inside a little bit. And that's okay, as long as, most of the bevel is on the outside. And, so this is another thing that I luckily have is the DMT, it's like contour cone set. And this comes in real handy, right here. When I'm doing the inside of these, in general, if your spoon knife is already polished on the inside or a gouge or something, then you're not going to mess around with these. But if they get damaged or they're older, or just like in this case, then this thing works out great. I'm having a hard time finding an angle here that I can see and the camera can see, and I just kind of gave up on it. So, sharpening takes a long time, especially if you're coming from shaping the knife yourself, so I'm not going to show all of it. When you're working on a upswept knife like this one, I'm kind of go through the movements here. You basically lift it up, and it'll catch that angle on the side there. So if you're going forward, you just lift up, and it'll automatically get that. And if you're going to the side, you just kind of rock your hand a little bit like this, and that'll get that bevel in that shape. There's all kind of curves on the upswept knives, so you just kind of have to figure it out and watch it real slowly at first, and get your wrist movement down before you attack it. Just kind of keep watching that. Make sure that shadow's not there underneath the bevel, and that you're not going too far forward either. So I think at this point I've moved over to the extra fine grit on the diamond stone, and just keep working and getting it closer to a mirror polish. I think this extra fine's like at 1200 grit, something like that. And I could probably go, do an in between, do like an 8000 or something, whatever the next grit is. But I think probably get it to go to a drop straight from here. Shouldn't be a problem. Just be a little bit extra time. And there you can see I'm struggling with the spoon knife again to get that done. And I don't have a curved set in this grit, so you can kind of catch the edge on most stones, or whatever kind they are. You can usually just kind of use the edge of it to kind of get a little bit of work done, as long as your the sweep on whatever tool it is isn't too deep. So yeah, basically just kind of turn it over and try to catch it there. It depends, I guess, on what it is, but this one has enough that you can catch a little bit of that edge, get enough done on there. Okay, so now we're on to stropping, and we're using the DMT paste today. And I'm just using some compressed cardboard. It's the back of a journal. You can use the inside of a cereal box or beer case. And this compound's worked out pretty well. I believe it's like the 0.3 micron. 3 micron. I'm not really sure. It's the finest grit compound that DMT sells, and it's worked out pretty well. It's definitely on my list, very short list of stropping compounds that work very well. It's going to be the DMT, and it's going to be the Deepwood Venture stropping compound, and then the Flex Cut Gold. And I don't know. I don't know where all of these were my whole carving career, because I had so many bad products from other people. And I guess that's most of wood carving, though. Anyway, so you can see it's turning black already. It's always a good sign. And I just go stropping through here, and then after I'm done on this side, I'll go strop on the other side of it that doesn't have any compound on it. And generally, you always want to do that. Just a little extra step in your stropping, and wipe off the crap. But it also, your strop with just leather or this cardboard is also does have a grit value that is even higher than with compound. So you can think of it as an extra polishing step. So then we strop everything else, and I'll do the same thing here. You can, again, with the cardboard, you can make the shape that you need for the inside of sweeps, or you can just kind of do that, use the corner, get some strop on there, and then the upswept one, do the same thing you did before, follow that curve. So now it's time to test out the knives that we made, and this is always the most fun part. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating. Sometimes you often need to go back and do a little bit more work, and just be practical when you're doing your shaping and you're getting everything down. Look at it. Is there a point on it, or is there huge whatever? You need it mirror polish, flat, the whole bevel, each side. And it needs to feel sharp. You need to get that burr going, and then you need to get that burr smaller and smaller until you strop it off. And you can see here these work great. It's the best steel you can buy. You can do heat treatment. It's as good as anybody else, and it's a really fun and satisfying project and thing to do, to make your own tools. And play blacksmith, bladesmith a little bit. And you can see here I'm doing against the grain cuts. It's kind of when the knives are doing very well. It's kind of the ultimate test there. It's not cutting paper, it's cutting wood, because that's what we're doing with them. And then we'll try the spoon knife on the basswood, which is kind of weird. I have a spoon here though that it's already carved out, but we can mess around with it. So yeah, you want to make sure when you test these, make sure it's cutting all along the length. Sometimes you can get part of the blade to be sharpened well, and then you'll feel like it gets caught on another part, or you'll see a little line that tears out, or you may see you just feel it get a little bit rough. So check the whole line of it, and if it's not, then just keep doing work on it. These are flexible, so they're thin, so when you're pressing on the sharpening stuff, you may be pressing it out of shape, and so that makes it not hitting everything. So be careful and watch everything on that. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful day.